Welcome to the ITSP Magazine Podcast Network. You are about to listen to the Soulful CXO podcast with Dr. Rebecca Wynn. These conversations focus on the intersection of technology, business, and humanity, exploring how these three areas impact each other. Dr. Wynn interviews guests, including business leaders, entrepreneurs, and experts in various fields, to share insights and experiences on cybersecurity, risk management, and leadership. The podcast aims to provide a fresh perspective on how technology can be leveraged to create positive change in the world. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Soulful CXO. I'm your host, Dr. Rebecca Wynn. We are pleased to have with us today Jennifer Brick, known as your new Career Bestie. She started her career in software training. She grew her career through technical industry, L&D, professional services, and client services. She's the CEO and founder of Capdeca Solutions. The company aims to help passionate corporate professionals succeed at work. She is author of Career Grow Up, the host of the top career success channel on YouTube. Jennifer's advice has been featured on Fast Company, Business Insider, Newsweek, and many, many more. Jennifer, my friend, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here chatting with you today.
One of the things that we're finding today is there's frustrations with the employer who have high churn because they're saying we're not hiring the right people. And then you're having people going to jobs like, wait, this is not what I bought into. It's not, it's not what was written on the paper. That a CEO said, let's be clear, we have a high churn rate because we keep hiring the wrong people. Wasn't addressing the internal culture issue.
If there's a high churn rate, it's a company issue. It could be they don't understand how to spec out the requirement. So they don't fully know how to run their business. So they keep on hiring the wrong person because they don't know what they actually need to be hiring for. So there's an expectations versus reality where they're miscommunicating their needs. But even if that's the case, it's still a leadership issue. So if there is a high churn rate, that's a moment where people need to look in the mirror and evaluate, okay, what is causing us to make the mistake in hiring again and again and again versus no one wants to work, everyone is lazy, which is, I know, kind of common discourse that's out there, especially as we kind of, as over the last few years, we've gone through the Great Resignation. We have quiet quitting. We have quiet firing. We have all of these things going on that have always existed, but now they have terms. And I think that what people need to step back and realize is that none of this phenomenon is new. But I think what has been amplified is the way that I put it is that a lot of people, their BS tolerance has gone down to zero, especially with all of the stressors that have gone on, kind of the craziness in the economy, craziness in the world over the last few years. They don't want to tolerate a bunch of stuff. So I think when it comes to as an individual in the seat, is this the right job for me? Is this the right environment for me? I could probably rattle off 200 different indicators of a toxic work environment, but I think ultimately a toxic workplace, the signals that it comes down to is, do you have autonomy, trust, and respect? Without autonomy, a workplace is going to be toxic. Autonomy means different things to different people. So if your boss says this, then this is that. We're individuals, so I don't want to put a blanket statement, but autonomy for all adults, really important thing. Trust, because if people don't trust you, you don't trust others, and you'll stop trusting yourself. And that's a very dangerous road to go down. Respect, physical, psychological, emotional safety, and support to do the job that you do so well, and to know that your work is going to pay off, whether it's, some level of job stability, whether it's getting a promotion, whether it's having a recognition, whatever it is that you're working towards. Those are the three things that I encourage people to really focus on to determine, am I in a good spot in my career, or do I need to start plotting my escape?
Yeah, I agree, especially plotting your escape. I've gone into jobs and jumped out quickly, and my peers too. You didn't even announce that I'm here for 6 weeks. My boss says he doesn't have time to read my emails or explain what's going on. That's very dangerous. What do you see along those lines? I hear that a lot. They use job descriptions grabbed from the internet and not saying specifically what you're going to be doing.
The big issue in the tech industry over the last few years, because VC money was given out like candy. So they had the ability. I saw someone made a remark about one of the big tech companies essentially like just collecting workers like dolls. And they're like, I was hired to serve no purpose other than they just wanted to hire me so no one else could. Which is such a weird phenomenon. And I don't think that's good from an employer's perspective, for an employee engagement, retention, employer branding, but also for an individual. Like, we have jobs to get paid. Let's not mince any words about that, even that if that's not a primary motivator, it is a motivator. But also in terms of hiring, there really needs to be, what does the business need right now? And what are they going to need 6 to 12 months? Sometimes managers spot the need. There's a lot of budget hiring that can happen with companies of like, I need this person, I need this role, and I'm just going to find the least expensive person, which is going to be an inexperienced person who doesn't fully know the job, but then they don't have the bandwidth to train the person. So it goes back to that issue of hiring the wrong person. Yes, you hired the wrong person without the experience. So you got to pay more to get the person who can do the job. Is that something you've experienced or witnessed?
Yeah, I have. And I recently was helping a startup that had about 600 people. And then when I was looking at security, governance, compliance, and help desk, they had like, I don't know, 32, 35 people. And I said, it is not a butts in the seat issue. It's a process and improvement issue, and that you're hiring people who are very inexperienced. If you pay more money and get people experienced, we know how to augment processes and procedure, things along those lines. It's not a button seats. But if you look at hypergrowth, ooh, we're growing this many people. And that's where you've seen the contraction. Yeah, very quickly, because you're like, I don't need 5 people to do that. Then I'm not being very good fiduciary with my budget that could be used to be doing other stuff or paying the more skilled talent. That leads me to ask, I hate the word transparency anymore, because I don't think transparency being transparent. I don't like where people say, ooh, it's psychologically safe anymore to ask questions. You try to work with human resources to resolve issues. And then pretty soon, let's find out you or other people are on the blacklist very quickly. And I know you talk about this a lot. Is HR friend or foe? And what should you share? What shouldn't you share?
How long do we have? I feel like this could be a long rant for me. I was peripheral in the HR world, close with a lot of HR leaders. HR is a very important skill. We need to go back to the history of HR to understand its role in business and the context in which it serves. HR first emerged to keep unions at bay. It has evolved past that. And I know that most people that go into HR are there because they want to help people. They want to have positive impacts on culture. They're going in for good reasons, but ultimately HR is there in order to protect the company, and they are still existing and functioning at the will of the executive team. They still have a boss that they are answering to. So really HR, I've seen so many times where they have the best intentions to address issues, create safe spaces, and enable open discourse, but it matters what culture the leadership at the top is setting. Because if leadership doesn't truly want the level of transparency that the people on the lower rungs that are building the company want to have, that's going to create conflict. This is where we can start to perceive a lot of lip service. I've worked with companies that say they're all about transparency, but then every single person I speak to will say that it is the most secretive, siloed organization that they have ever existed in. So how can we reconcile those two things? We need specificity. I can tell you my values all day until I'm blue in the face. My values are what I live by. As a leader who hires people, I want to make sure that I am providing my definition. It's not just a value on my website. What does this look like in practice? As a leader, one thing that I always did when I was interviewing candidates, I would encourage them to ask specific questions to the team. What's it like to work with me? How does this actually show up? Because this is how they could gain an understanding both of the team function, the company culture, but also what their experience as me as a leader was going to be. Because I could say, I have direct discourse with you, and they might envision that to be very different than what it actually is. And that could be a good thing. It could be a bad thing, right? So I think we also, something that companies and HR can do is make sure that not everybody is going through career coaching and learning how to interview. Not everyone has interviewed for as many jobs as I have with my career. to learn those. A lot of the questions, especially as we get more experience, come from falling into ditches, right? Like, I know that I've had this bad experience now, and I never would have known to ask this question, but now I know what to look for. Companies and HR can benefit employees and the job candidates by providing more education, especially if they're transparent. It increases transparency throughout the process.
So what are the kind of things that you can advise people on when they're looking for that job?
One of the biggest flags is the dynamic in the interview process. Are they just interviewing them, or do they expect you to interview them as well? Because if they are consuming all the time with questions that they have for you, that's a red flag. You're supposed to be figuring it out as well. It's not that you're just, so desperate for any job and should like grovel on their feet upon their feet should you have the pleasure of receiving a job offer. You need to be figuring it out as well, because while they know their company, you know your skills. There needs to be mutual questioning. And if that's not being provided, that to me is a very big red flag. I also think that the treatment you receive is a red flag. I can tell you a story from when I first immigrated to New York. Getting your first job when you immigrate to the US is a way harder thing when you're not kind of American passing like I am, until they looked at my resume and knew I was on work authorization. I was in an advanced stage with a mid-sized startup in New York City. The role was created for me. I knew they wouldn't be able to hire anyone better than me. So for the last stage of the interview, they had me come in to do a presentation, which I think everyone knows that these are very common, especially in client-facing roles. They tried to disrupt me. So there was multiple people sitting in the room. One kept interrupting, another taking phone calls, another eating. And, me and you, we're both facilitators. We know how we would deal with this if we were training a group of people. But when you're in an interview situation, this is a very different thing, right? So you're not going to respond as you would typically respond. You're probably just going to go with it. And in your head, you're freaking out. And at the end of this presentation, the lead interviewer was like, we did this to mess with you, to see how you would respond. I was like, do I just walk out right now? I didn't want to burn a bridge because tech communities are smaller than we think. I ended up sitting in for the rest. And then they were like, well, our SVP is going to come in and talk to you now. And I was like, I was not expecting to meet the SVP today. Thanks for the warning. Can I escape? But anyway, he came in, talked at me and not giving me any opportunity to ask questions, talked for 15, 20 minutes about how if I should get this job offer, I would be so indebted to him that I would need to stay for at least 5 years for him to get an ROI. Again, bear in mind, this job description is written for me with my exact experience, which was fairly niche. And then just like walked out of the room at the end. And I did end up getting a job offer, which was 50% of market value. They were shocked when I declined it. Things aren't always going to be that big. Sometimes they can be much subtler than that. But I think looking at the attitudes, the other thing that I always love, especially in those situations where there is multiple people in a room, which I think as an interviewee is stressful, but look at how people are interacting with each other. And even if you're just going on site for an interview, show up early, observe and eavesdrop. If the office is dead silent, maybe that's not an environment you're going to dig. Maybe that's your perfect environment. Knowing what you're looking for and what environment suits you is going to also help you identify those subtle flags as well as the major flags in the interview process.
Yeah, I noticed if you have panel discussions, who are in those panels, and then are you making me sit in the lobby waiting an hour in between those panels?
Yeah.
Did you offer me water? Did you offer me anything along those lines? How are you showing me value as a human?
Absolutely. No, the interview stage is where they should impress you. They should woo you as much, if not more, than you woo them. Top talent is always marketable.
Every time I've had that red flag, it's never undone itself.
Absolutely. I've been in a situation where the people doing the hiring and participating in hiring knew they were selling a different expectation than what was going to happen. I have confronted people of saying like, why did you say that? That wasn't really true. And they're like, well, because no one would want to work here if they really knew. One thing you mentioned, making an exit and plotting that exit quickly. And this is something that a lot of people terrifies them. And I can't tell you how many people that I've spoken to that have had that bait and switch happen to them. And they end up like, well, I need to stay for at least 18 months. So I just need to put up with this for another 16 months, nothing good is going to come from this. Your resume is not going to be like flawed forever if you don't stay in a job for a set criteria of time. Will it bother some recruiters or companies? Potentially, sure, but those are not going to be your companies, because I think that good leaders and good companies know that when you're in the right spot and you have the ability to identify that and do something about that, that's a great skill to have, because that means that you're proactive, that you're not going to settle, and you're going to bring that same energy into that company. Not that you're going to jump ship quickly, but when you see a problem, when you see an issue, you're going to be a proactive problem solver. That's a huge asset as a candidate.
I do. I think people have asked me that, and I mentor people. I said, I only stayed there 6 weeks or 2 months. It was getting progressively worse. You don't have to put that on a resume. You don't.
You cannot prioritize your resume over your mental health, because the cost to your resume is going to be much less than being in an awful toxic environment for 18 months, 2 years, 5 years, whatever number you think is in your head that it's acceptable before you leave. You have to prioritize yourself in that situation, because the only thing that's going to happen when you remain, not only will you experience stress, trauma, unnecessary drama that none of us need in our lives, there's also a risk that you're going to experience skill atrophy, because maybe you're going to be under leveraged. You might be so over leveraged that you end up completely burning out and then not having a chance but to take a career break, which is a situation that I have worked with many people that have ended up forced into career breaks they didn't plan for because things got so bad. But also, over the course of those 18 months, what opportunities are you missing? Opportunities to be in a great company. There's so much cost to staying that making the decision to leave, there's so much upside on the other side of that decision.
None of us are guaranteed tomorrow. So definitely put yourself first today.
Yeah.
With that, our time has totally flown by.
If you're interested in attending a training, hiring me to speak, or getting links to all my socials, they're on my website, capdecasolutions.com. If you want to hear more of my rantings, go to YouTube, search Jennifer Brick, and I'm going to pop right up.
Great. With Jennifer, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Soulful CXO podcast with Dr. Rebecca Wynn, part of the ITSP Magazine podcast network. If you learned something new and this conversation made you think, then add this show to your favorite podcast player. Subscribe to the ITSP Magazine YouTube channel and share the ITSP Magazine podcast network with your friends, family, and colleagues. If you represent a company and wish to connect your brand to our conversations and our audience, visit itspmagazine.com to learn how to sponsor one or more of our shows. We hope you will come back for more stories and follow us on our journey.